Welcome to O-State Daily. Casey Porter here. After a disappointing day up in Manhattan, there is just no other way to put it. It was, again, I described it last week as bowling shoe ugly. You can put that on steroids for today. Oklahoma State actually got off to a pretty good start, had the early turnover, then ended up having to kick a couple of field goals, and you kind of felt like on the road against a team that was fighting mad after getting beat by BYU last week. Which, by the way, and I've said this a couple of times this week, yes, K-State got, of course, if you look at the game overall, K-State did not get their butts kicked by BYU in any other aspect of the game other than the scoreboard. But BYU did flip the scoreboard on them, and it made it look a lot worse if you didn't watch the game just looking at the score. But I'll say this. BYU is a really good team, and if Oklahoma State does not figure out a whole lot of different things, of which we're going to cover all on today's show, and we're going to go through all of it. And I'll tell you what, after a game like this, when you've been an Oklahoma State fan for 51 years, when you grew up in Stillwater like I did, when all of your heroes were OSU football and baseball players growing up like mine were, it's really easy to just have steam coming out of your ears and to want to fire everybody and to start screaming and hollering and to get kind of incoherent about it. And I will say this was a bad performance all the way around. We're going to go through all the accountability of it, but it's not going to be done so in a way to where it's so emotional that it becomes irrational. So we're going to sit down and kind of like what Mike Gundy talks about all the time. We're going to sit down and think, okay? I mean, not just, hey, what makes you feel better at the moment as far as throwing shade on somebody? What could make you feel better as far as just throwing a temper tantrum and a fit? What would make you feel better there? Not that. It's not going to be that type of reaction. It's going to be more so, I'm the type of fan at this point at my age to where that type of stuff doesn't make me feel better anyways. Trust me, it used to. Anybody that knows me knows that I've thrown many a temper tantrum about Oklahoma State athletics in my day, no doubt about it. But at my age, to be honest with you, those types of things don't honestly make me feel better anymore. What actually makes me feel better is to sit down and analyze and think and go through actually all of the action and try to, at least in my mind, with some great help of the great Oklahoma State fans, try to figure out what in the hell is going wrong. What can Oklahoma State do for this not to be the same song every week for the rest of the season? That's really what this show is going to be today. It's just going to be what the hell's happening, what's going on, and what do we think Oklahoma State. Of course, it doesn't matter what we think, because I'll say this again, I've said this many different times, Mike Gundy is the greatest thing ever to happen to Oklahoma State, and what he thinks needs to happen at OSU, he's right almost every single time. But like I've said a couple of times too, that doesn't mean he's always right. And so, I mean, I'll say this too, in the past, there's been a lot of turning points. Remember when Braylon Presley left OSU a couple years ago? Mike Gundy wore the OAN shirt, which, hey, he has every right to wear that OAN shirt. Not saying he doesn't, and I'm not saying that if he wants to, he can do whatever he wants. But you have to understand there are going to be a certain percentage of your clientele that's going to piss off, right? So I only say that to say, remember when he went through all that and players were saying that he didn't even know their first names and he was disconnected and maybe not putting in the amount of time that he should into the program? Braylon Presley left a little bit of shade as he left. Mike got that flipped on his head. You had the terrible season 2 seasons ago. You started off rough last year. 2014, Oklahoma State goes and beats OU. You bring in a freshman quarterback, Mason Rudolph. That springs you into a really good period of OSU football. There have been periods of times where Oklahoma State, 2009 is another one. OSU goes to OU and gets shut out in a game where I think most people thought OSU was favored. Remember, he kept playing Zach Robinson instead of Brandon Whedon that day, and Zach Robinson was not healthy whatsoever, couldn't throw the ball. OSU couldn't score. That was another crossroads. So Mike Gundy has been at a lot of different crossroads, and every single time he has come through. So I'm going to say it again. What Mike Gundy thinks needs to happen at OSU, he knows better than anybody what needs to happen at OSU to right the ship and to get things going. And what I always say, even back when I used to be more emotional about this situation is he has more than earned the right to figure out what the hell is going on and to fix it, right? Because at this point, there is no way that any coach can be obtuse enough at this point just to say, well, we just need to stay the course. Well, we didn't play good. Well, we got outcoached. Well, I think we're doing the right things, but we just need to shore up a little bit of You can't say that. Today was too bad. Today was too obvious. And the thing is, there's two parts of sports as far as just evaluating it. There's the process, and I think if you know me, baseball is my first love. And the results in baseball, it's such a game of failure. You can't obsess over results, because if you do, you're constantly going to be thinking negatively and you're going to be miserable. So what you have to do is you have to concentrate on what's called the process, meaning, hey, maybe I haven't been getting as many hits as I have lately because hitting the baseball is incredibly difficult, meaning if you fail 70% of the time, you're a Hall of Famer, right? So instead of just pressing over the results, maybe I need to focus on the process of it. Am I swinging at the right pitches? Am I prepared enough? Am I taking good swing? Do I have a mechanical flaw? Am I giving my team quality at bats? If I'm doing all those process aspects of the game, then you can make the statement like Mike Gundy does all the time. Hey, let's just ride it out. Let's let the process play itself out. Let's stay the course, and the results will eventually follow. But right now, to be honest with you, the process of this team has been worse than the results. The results have been way better than the process. And what do I mean by that is Oklahoma State's defense. They can't stop the run. They can't stop the big play. And by the way, Coach Nardo, of which if you follow O State Daily or me or whatever, you know that I love Coach Nardo. He is a savant when it comes to X's and O's. But he was hired to run the 3-3-5 scheme. And I know the first response of OSU fans is going to be, well, you're playing running teams. You've got Arkansas that likes to run all the power rushing football. Utah likes to run the ball, power rushing football. K-State likes to run the ball. South Dakota State likes to run the ball. So it makes sense. Let's go to a 40 front in the offseason. Your biggest 4 games to start the season are against power rushing teams. We need another lineman. But here's the deal. Coach Nardo is a 3-3-5, odd stack, whatever you want to call it, savant. That's the defense he knows. And it's like, hey, I'm not very good at mechanics, but like if I change a part on my vehicle, if everything goes right, I can do it. But if there's something that's not exactly perfect, I don't know the adjustments to make, right? I don't know, should I move this hose there, I just know that this is how, like I go look at a YouTube video, I put it in like this. Beyond that, I don't know anything. So when you go to a 40-man front instead of a 3-3-5, it changes all the rotations, it changes the back end coverages, and it changes the way that a defensive coach thinks about adjustments. So while a 3-3-5 defense actually looks like an easy box to run against because there's only 3 linemen, only 3 linebackers, a 6-man box, and you're going, wow, run the ball. What a 3-3-5 actually is an 8-man box because Trey Rucker, Lyric Rawls, Kobe Hilton, whoever your last year Kendall Daniels, whoever your safeties were, they actually are 2 box player run players. I mean, they're not technically in the box, but you can consider them in the box because they are absolutely run players, which is why Trey Rucker leads the team in tackling all the time. That is by design in a 3-3-5 defense. So when you go to a 40-man front, well, let me back up and say this too. With that 3-3-5, that also gives you 3 safeties deep. So what you have is like, let me give you, for instance, last year, you have Trey Rucker at one safety on the side. You have, it wasn't necessarily last year, Lyric Rawls because he was hurt, but let's take this year, Lyric Rawls on the other side. Then you have Kendall Daniels in the middle. Kendall Daniels can just pretty much roam and go wherever he wants, whether it be in the run game or the pass game, because you have the 2 safeties on the outside that are fitting the run. So let's say that they run to the right side, to Trey Rucker's side. Trey Rucker comes screaming downhill to fit the run. Then your backside safety rotates over the top. So you're able to play the run and the pass to that side, correct? So what happens is when you go to a 40 front, now you don't have those three safeties. Now instead of playing a defense that is a conflict defense like that, where a defender like Rucker can play both pass and run and be a really good run player, now you've lost those layers. You've lost that extra layer of defense. So whenever a running back breaks through, say, the first level, and here's another thing that OSU defense does a lot. Coach Nardo's always blitzed a lot. I mean, his blitzes are really good. So now, without that extra layer of defense on the back end, and I'm going to explain it even further here in a second, by going to a 40 front, when Oklahoma State blitzes and they guess wrong and the other team hits a seam, adios, because you don't have that extra layer of defense behind it, right? Okay, and so also to add to that, Oklahoma State, because they're in a 40-man front, now instead of playing an aggressive like a quarters defense that you could do with the three high safeties, because you can rotate, maybe into like a post inverted, like single high safety, cover three after your play side safeties come down and fit. Okay, instead of doing that, now they're having to play man coverage across the board, which means when other teams' receivers go and just release downfield, our corners and our safeties have to run with them. Now their backs are to the quarterback, and when a guy like Avery Johnson or a guy like Wilson last week takes off and runs, they don't even see him. So it's been a lose-lose proposition, all to say we need an extra lineman down on the defensive line just because of the teams we're playing. That's the first thing that, from an X and O's perspective, that has me frustrated. And we'll kind of see, hey, we do have some people logging in right here. We have Saw 72, 893, absolutely embarrassing performance today. People got happy that OSU started 3-0, but Bowman has not looked good all season. He cannot hit a wide receiver in stride, nor can he make a progression read. Yeah, that's been tough. And the thing about it has been that actually he's had great protection too. And Alan Bowman, I'll say this about him. I appreciate Alan Bowman. If you follow O State Daily, I think you know that I really, really, really appreciate Alan Bowman. Last year was headed downhill. There was the three-headed quarterback, and he turned a disaster of a season last year into a not a rebuild, but a reload. I mean, this young man took the reins last year, and he got Oklahoma State into the Big 12 championship game. He got him into a nice bowl, and he beat OU, and he really bridged the gap. So I really appreciate Alan Bowman and what he's done for Oklahoma State. Having said that, this year, it's obvious Casey Dunn is not going to be able to figure out that you need to have two flow reads on your run game, fake a jet sweep to Brennan Presley, who, by the way, didn't have near enough targets, didn't have near enough touches today. We'll get into that here a little bit more. But it's obvious Casey Dunn's not going to be able to scheme a run game. Now, last year, they switched their entire blocking scheme from zone scheme to gap scheme, caught people unaware. That saved the season. That part of the process, I just don't see, like I said last week, anything like that coming to save the day this year. So having said that, without a run game, and then Oklahoma State. So here, Oklahoma State, I hear every week that the other team stacks the box, which I'm not saying that's untrue. But then you watch OSU's run game called by Casey Dunn, and all the run plays are inside the offensive tackles. And you're thinking, okay, 2 + 2 is not adding up here. If you're telling me the box is stacked, but then all your run plays are inside the box, how does that make any sense? So that's number one. So it's obvious to me at this point, Casey Dunn is not going to figure out a way to X and O enough run scheme to be able to rely on a run game. So, like that first field goal today, it's 3rd down and 4, and Oklahoma State runs the ball. And I'm thinking, okay, well, they ran it to make 4th and 2 so they can go for it on 4th down. Then they kick the field goal, and I'm thinking, at what point has Oklahoma State ran the ball well enough just to think you can turn around against a good rush defense in K-State and just get 4 yards. So your idea was just to turn around against a stacked box and get 4 yards on third down against a good run defense, or we're kicking a field goal when your defense all year long has struggled to stop anybody. That was a head scratcher to me amongst many other head scratchers. And again, this isn't going to be an emotional rant to where, hey, he sucks or that. It's going to be more my opinions of the scheme, X's and O's, things that from an analytical perspective, I think could have been better, that weren't good today. That was one of the head scratchers there. So back to Alan Bowman. So it's obvious that the run game's not going to get schemed to where you can rely on that over and over and over. So at that point, Oklahoma State needs a quarterback that can help with that run game by being able to run the ball. And then also, too, another aspect of Alan Bowman is that his arm's not strong. So why is it that every single pass we throw is like 38 yards in the air from the far hash to the far sideline, and it's some kind of timing route? I mean, it just seems like the only routes we run are out routes to the sideline, hitches that are outside the numbers, or slants that are right on the numbers. All of them are pretty long passes that require a fairly good amount of accuracy and not very much margin for error. And none of that is good for Alan Bowman because he doesn't have a strong arm. He's not super accurate. And so forcing him to make throws that have very little margin for error over and over and over without a run game to bail him out when he's not accurate, it just has not been a formula that has worked. So although I greatly appreciate what Alan Bowman has done for Oklahoma State, trust me, I do. I'm not trying to throw shade on the young man. He has done a lot to help this program. He helped us beat Arkansas. Again, he helped us get in the Big 12 championship game. He helped us beat OU last year. I think, of course, the Big 12, and I don't know the health of Zane Flores. I don't know any of the hell, he might not even be available right now. I think I heard on one of the post games he might not. I don't know, but was he on the sideline, I think was a question. So those are all little things that we don't know because we're not there at practice every day to know the ins and outs. But all things being available at this point, why doesn't he come into the game today? So here's the deal, okay? You either win or you build, especially at a place like Oklahoma State. So if you're not winning championships, we're to the point at Oklahoma State to where if we're not going to win a Big 12 championship, okay, then we need to be building our young players to win one next year. The worst case scenario is to win, to me, I mean, hey, go to a bowl. Yay, you won 6 games. Oklahoma State's going to figure out a way to win 3 more games, make a crappy bowl somewhere, and there will be older Oklahoma State fans that, trust me, I went to college at Oklahoma State. As a matter of fact, I'm going to release an interview with Mike Curtis, one of my best friends in the world, who started his career in 1991, which was the 0-10-1 season. No generation of Oklahoma State fans felt the 90s more than mine, okay? But that's not how I allow myself to dominate my expectations of OSU. I'm not satisfied with Oklahoma State's performance today because I remember my first year at OSU in 1991 being 0-10-1. They're totally separate from each other. It's an entirely different generation. Okay, so it is okay for Oklahoma State fans to be upset and expect more out of today. That doesn't mean we want Coach Gundy fired. I'm not saying I want anybody fired. That's just to say today was just absolutely terrible football that no Oklahoma State fan should accept. So to get back to my point, Oklahoma State fans, in my opinion, should expect Oklahoma State either to be competing to win a Big 12 title or turning it over to the young guys and building towards the next Big 12 title. So Oklahoma State reminds me of 1985. Paul Blair, John Washington, Matt Monger, Leslie O'Neal, all these guys were seniors, and you go to the Gator Bowl and you play Florida State and you lose because they had expectations of winning and going to the Orange Bowl. And when that didn't happen, it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, we're not in the Orange Bowl, whatever, right? So at the point to where the Big 12 championship no longer is really even, I mean, yes, it's always possible, but it's not plausible. This season needs to get turned over to the next round of Oklahoma State Cowboys that are talented enough to win the next Big 12 title, whether that be next year, the year after that, whenever that may be. That needs to happen. Here's one of my biggest complaints about today. As bad as it was, as unimaginative as the offense was, as porous as the defense was, it kills me to say that because I love Coach Nardo. As many big plays as they gave up, K-State just did whatever they want. And quite frankly, in the second half, K-State absolutely kicked OSU's ass. Okay? So having said all of that, as bad as all that was, the worst part of today's loss to me is the fact that everything came out empty. So, like, let's say Oklahoma State goes and gets their asses kicked today like they did. There's no other way to put it. Oklahoma State got their asses kicked, all right, by a decent team. No shade on K-State. They're okay. They're nothing special. This is by far not the best K-State team I've seen. The running backs are good. They're not Darren Sproles. I don't see necessarily a Tyler Lockett. Avery Johnson's still young and makes mistakes. Good player. Their defense is okay. I mean, Mott was a good player at Iowa. He's their best defender, right? And I mean, I don't think he's like, I mean, I think he's good, right? But I mean, this isn't like a K-State team like the L. Roberson years and 1998 K-State, where it's like, oh my God, everything's going to have to go perfect for us to win. It's not that type of team, right? So the worst part of today, other than you got your ass kicked by that team, is the fact that you came away completely empty-handed. And the reason why you became empty-handed, now, so like give K-State some credit for kicking our ass, but coming away empty-handed is an unforced error. That is an unforced error because it is your choice who you choose to put on the field. When you're getting your asses kicked by Kansas State on the road and you know it's not going to change, why stick with all of the seventh-year senior guys? Not meaning to throw shade on any of those guys. I love those guys. I appreciate everything they've done. But there are times to where you got to turn it over to your young guys and give them experience and build for the future. If Zane Flores was available today, there is no excuse why he didn't play at least the entire fourth quarter. And not just handing the ball off to Trent Howland or to Vailahe or whoever it may be, but actually running the entire playbook, of which that playbook right now, my gosh, I mean, come on. This is a Division I football. So we put out H-backs, but we never throw to them. We put out tight ends, but we never throw to them. Right? Okay. We talk about how the box is stacked, but yet we run all of our runs inside the field. And then our quarterback's probably his biggest weakness is his arm strength, and yet we throw everything to the sideline. And then we don't run the ball very well because we don't stretch the ball sideways, and we don't so the entire defense. So if you watch that K-State 3-3-5, did you watch their safeties come downhill all day? You know why they're able to come downhill like that? Because we didn't do anything to make them run sideways first. Or we didn't make them do anything to make them come downhill like that and go, oops, they're going sideways instead. There he goes. So next time I better think twice about trying to fit that alley as fast as I did. We did nothing like that. So it was very, very, very frustrating today. It's a part of the program. It's a part of the year, and we have a wonderful crowd logging in. Thank you so much for everybody logging in. It's another one of those periods in time to where Gundy has always gotten it right. Always. Now, I will say this, and I think we can probably all agree with this. Sometimes it takes him a lot longer than we would like to get over some of his stubbornness, to get to the right decisions. But in the end, in my opinion, and I think we should all agree, almost every time he has come up with the right solution, if not having taken too long, right? So again, this looks like it's shaping up to be another one of those situations to where Mike Gundy is taking too long, but I still think OSU fans should totally trust the fact that he will get this right eventually. Okay. Hey, we have a great crowd logging in. Cowboy Allen, it makes me feel better. Cowboy Allen also says that he thinks Mike Gundy is washed at this point. I would totally disagree with that. Mike Gundy had I mentioned this in his post, in his matter of fact, if you go back to Chase and I's podcast this last week, I mentioned that Mike Gundy was very reserved, and typically speaking, I've been wrong in my life way more than I've been right, and probably everything I've said today, I'm just some dude behind a microphone that probably doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, right? And so, hey, trust me, I don't take myself too seriously at all. But I will say this, I was right about this, and I think today proves it. I said on our podcast that I released this last week with Chase, when Mike Gundy subdued like he was at his press conference on Monday, that tells me that he is in a humble state of mind. And when he's in a humble state of mind, that means he doesn't have answers. He doesn't have solutions. So that was the number one concern for me from what I saw about his press conference Monday is that, whenever he has a solution and he like almost baits people into wanting to doubt him. And so in his mind, he's going, hey, watch this. I got this. Watch this. Saturday will prove all of you suckers wrong. He kind of has that cocky, kind of standoffish attitude. But when he's in kind of that humble, very respectful mode, that's when you know that Mike Gundy's in a very reflective part of the season. He's in a reflective mind thought. And typically speaking, that's because he doesn't have answers yet. And squarely, nobody on this Oklahoma State coaching staff has answered yet. So, hey, like I said, I'm not going to go near as far as to say that, hey, these are the same coaches that got us to the Big 12 title game last year. It's the same Mike Gundy that has been the greatest coach, maybe the best coach in college football, short of maybe like a Nick Saban in the last 20 years. So I definitely don't think he's washed. I just think this year's caught him off guard. And at this point, he just doesn't have answers. I just don't think he knows what the answers are yet. And who could? I mean, the problems are so complicated right now. It's very difficult. Hey, Nick Loy, thank you so much for joining. How can we not get Ollie the ball in space? I don't know, man. So, why can't we run Ollie in the Wildcat? I know Mike Gundy mentioned that, hey, we ran some plays last year in their last week in the first drive that worked. Why didn't we go back to him? Why can't we run Ollie in the Wildcat? Why can't we get Ollie? Of course, we did run some outside zones, but we need to do it with, again, multiple flow reads, get him to the edge, make those safeties have to make business decisions. That's a great question, Nick Loy. But the reason why we can't get Ollie in space is because your offensive coordinator isn't calling plays to get him in space. I like Casey Dunn. I think he tilts formations and tilts fields and finds great matchups. I think the way that he formations people, I think that the ways that he tilts fields, and I think the matchups that he finds, he's great at that. I think his X's and O's lack, though. So there's a difference between calling plays to find matchups, but you only have a few very simple plays. But we're going to find the matchups that work, and we're going to keep running the same handful of concepts over and over because you can't stop us because we have a better physical matchup. Some coaches don't do that because they're so caught up on X's and O's. They forget, they don't look at matchups like that. They're looking at their play sheet. And then other coaches, they're all about just running their plays and getting everybody open based on the X's and O's of the scheme they're running. And so right now, Casey Dunn is not running scheme that is getting Ollie Gordon in space, point blank. Why is that? Because he's not running multiple flow reads. He's not running the Tatum Bell counter pitch. We saw him pitch it out, I think, one time today. But again, that's still, once you see that on film, there's got to be multiple ways that you figure out how to get Ollie Gordon outside of that 6, 7, 8-man box, right? So that's a great point, Nick Loy. Matt, what was up with the clock management before halftime? Yeah, well, I think that's another situation too. And I didn't think Mike Gundy managed a very good game last week either against Utah. I thought he left Garrett Rangel in way too long. Just interesting decisions. You leave Garrett Rangel in for the entire third quarter last week, and then you don't bring any other backup quarterback in this week. Just bizarre decision-making. But to be honest with you, here's what happened in that situation. And I think I don't know that I have a big-time issue with any of it, because you're thinking, okay, well, we get the ball first. Things haven't necessarily – we've had some good things go for us, but it hasn't necessarily been great. We have made great second-half adjustments. Let's just not do anything stupid before half. Let's get into the halftime locker room. Let's make some adjustments. Let's come out first possession. Let's go score, and let's get back in this game, right? Problem is, you came out in the second half, and you go 3 and out, and that was a precursor to just getting your ass kicked the entire second half. Matt, thank you so much for joining. We've got West Virginia next week at home, and then BYU, a night game in Provo. It is very conceivable we go 0-4 to start conference. BYU is good. You're exactly right, Matt. But other than like 2 years ago, to where it seems like the wheels completely fell off, and then for a period of time in 2014, the Dax Garman year before you brought in Mason Rudolph, before Tyreek Hill returned to punt, before 2005, his first year, you can't count that because he kicked 7 players off the team. So I can really only remember 2 times in Mike Gundy's entire tenure where the wheels just kind of completely fell off, right? And in both of those cases, you made a bowl, right? So 0-4, I think, would be a completely falling off type scenario. The Mike Gundy that I know always figures out a way right when you start counting them out, right when you start thinking that the whole entire season is going to be just a whole set of catastrophic events, and it's going to be like 0-8. He always seems to figure out a way to get it turned around and win just enough to make it to where it's not a total disaster. So BYU, I think, is a better team than Oklahoma State right now. I think Oklahoma State still is a better team than West Virginia. I'll be surprised if they lose both of those games. I would not be surprised if they won both of those games. I'm betting on Mike Gundy right there. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm betting not necessarily on any of the coaches, any of our personnel. I'm betting on the competitive nature of Mike Gundy to vote against that, losing the next 2 games and going 0-4. Theo the GOAT, yes, that was a meltdown in Manhattan. It was not a very good game at all. SSSS, our offense ain't the same anymore. No, it's not. And you don't have a dynamic quarterback. So Alan Bowman can't run the ball. He doesn't have a strong arm, and he throws off his back foot. He gets jittery when you get pressure on him. Those are all bad combinations, because when you can't run the ball, then they're going to blitz him. And if you get jittery when you get blitzed and you throw the ball off your back foot, you're either going to be inaccurate, or even worse, you're going to throw the ball to the other team. And that's what we've seen. So what teams have figured out against OSU is put 1 half extra guy in the box. So if OSU, say, is in 10 personnel, 1 back, no tight end, 5 linemen, that means Oklahoma State has 5 blockers. So all the defense needs now is 5.5 men in the box. So if Oklahoma State, say, has an H-back, so now you have a running back and an H-back. Now you have 6 blockers. So now what the defense will do is they'll put 6.5 guys. 6 guys in the box, another safety-type player that's half run, half pass, and then they'll man up on the outside, and then when they think OSU is going to throw, which was every down in the second quarter and basically the entire second half until the game was out of control, then they blitz. And they know even if they don't sack Alan Bowman, which doesn't happen hardly ever, they don't have to, because all they got to do is for Alan Bowman to see the blitz coming. He gets antsy. He either leaves the pocket too soon and kills the play and throws it into the first row of stands, or worse, he sees the blitz, he throws off his back foot and either throws an inaccurate pass or throws it to the other team. That's the rut Oklahoma State's gotten into. There's only 2 solutions to that. One is either you figure out the running game with Alan Bowman as the quarterback to where the play action game is more comfortable for him because other teams can't blitz, Or you get a quarterback that when other teams do blitz and play press man coverage, you do what Avery Johnson and Isaac Wilson did to Oklahoma State. You break a rush lane and you scramble your way away from a blitz with secondary members and man coverage with their backs turned to the quarterback. Those are really your only two solutions right now because I don't see Casey Dunn changing. So you either figure out a better run scheme to make the run game more effective, to make the pocket cleaner and safer for Bowman where he doesn't get jittery and throw off his back foot, or you put in a scrambling quarterback. So you tell me, which one's more likely? Casey Dunn in the next two practices puts in a whole entirely new scheme that allows Oklahoma State to run better and create a cleaner pocket to where Alan Bowman doesn't get jittery and throw off his back foot. Which one's more likely, that or you put in somebody like Zane Flores that can actually run the ball and get away from all that pressure and actually make the defense pay for pressuring like that? Which change can you actually make in two practices, right? The scheme changes or the personnel changes? I would claim the personnel changes are easier. That's not to mean I've appreciated everything Alan Bowman's done for Oklahoma State. I just personally think they're at that point right now. What a wonderful crowd we have logging in. What do you think we should do to get back? Yeah, I just mentioned all that. Hey, Theo the GOAT, throw to the tight ends, to the touchdowns and winning plays against Arkansas went to someone we never threw to. Okay, yes, I totally agree. Josh Ford and all these guys can catch the ball. I mean, one way, so like tight ends are usually safety covers. So perfect case scenario today, K-State's in a 3-3-5, right? So their safeties when we ran the ball were just go back and watch the first half. Their safeties were they were at the line of scrimmage all day long. Well, the best way to beat that, because typically speaking, a tight end is a safety cover, right? Release your tight end on a pass play. So either here's two outcomes to that, okay? Actually, there's three. So if you release your tight end and that safety keeps coming up on a run fit, then that tight end's wide open because the safety's not covering that tight end. We saw that. If you want to see an example of that, go back to the Kansas game at home last year. Remember that tight end for KU that kept getting wide open? That's exactly what was happening. Trey Rucker would come up on the run play. They would fake the run play, throw it to the tight end. The tight end was Trey Rucker's cover. And instead of covering him, he was coming up on the run. So there's option number one, your tight end's wide open. Option number two is they roll that middle safety over the top of the tight end. That means that they have one less safety in coverage. That opens up all of your slant games, your deep digs, your mesh routes back to the other side of the field, because every time you have to roll a safety one way, that makes you more vulnerable on the other side to your pass game. Also, if you're rolling, so like if you're faking a run to ollie to the right, safety's coming down, you're rolling your backside safeties over the top of the safety that came down. Now Zane Flores keeps it and gets out the back door with no safety on the backside of that. That's what's happening to OSU. And then also the defense is in man coverage behind that, and you're running them off. Now you're talking about Zane Flores ripping off 25, 30-yard gains. Defenses and safeties not being able to fit up in the box on the run game. Now all of a sudden, because of that, now you can actually hand it off to Ollie Gordon for 5 or 6 yards, because now you're actually going to be able to match up hat for hat in the box. It's not that complicated. It's really not. So again, I'm going to say it. Either Casey Dunn can draw up more creative scheme to figure out a way to get this run game going for Alan Bowman so his pocket's cleaner, or you can put in a quarterback that can threaten the other side of the line of scrimmage and run the ball and be mobile, a runner and a mobile quarterback to beat defenses when they load the box against Ollie. Should we use the fullback more? I would say not necessarily fullback. As a matter of fact, I think I would ditch the fullback unless you were like in the diamond, like we used to see with Kai Staley, who I talked to a couple weeks ago. I would use H-backs and tight ends, and I would release them, because here's another deal. When you release a tight end downfield, that safety has to cover it. Now that safety's not in run coverage. So now that's one less guy in the box. So if you're looking to add a numbers advantage in the box, one way to do it is to release your tight end. Plus, when you release your tight end, okay, there's a saying in football that your defensive end has to get wood on that tight end. So if you watch when a tight end releases, that defensive end for a second or two is going to try to jam that defensive end. So that tight end. So when that defensive end is getting wood on that tight end, guess what they're not doing? They're not rushing the quarterback, which is going to give Alan Bowman that extra half a second to throw the ball. And sometimes that half a second is the difference between Alan Bowman throwing off his back foot and getting jittery, and Alan Bowman standing in the pocket and being comfortable and throwing with his feet underneath him and making a good pass. So there's a lot of issues to that, and we have just a absolute wonderful crowd logging in. I thank everybody here for tuning in to O State Daily and leaving your thoughts here on OSU football. But yeah, this has been a season to where, you know, I mean, it's you're an OSU fan, you understand it, right? You have all these gigantic expectations. You have the linemen come back, the quarterback comes back, Ollie comes back. You got Trey Rucker, you got Nick Martin, you got Coach Colin Oliver's hurt, you got Colin Oliver hurt. That didn't help, but that shouldn't mean that you go from being a defense that you expect to be really good to the defense that we saw today. And so right now, if you're an Oklahoma State fan, you're confused, you're upset, you're probably quite pissed about the way you played today. But more than just being angry or mad or wanting to throw a temper tantrum, I think Oklahoma State fans right now are just confused. Like, what in the hell is going on? I mean, what am I seeing right here, right? I mean, I think more so than anything, that's where Oklahoma State fans are at right now. At least that's where I'm at. That's the emotions that I get. The same things teams are doing to our offense is what we need to do to them, right? Think of K-State, mobile quarterback. Think of Arkansas, mobile quarterback. Think of Utah, mobile quarterback. None of them are great passing quarterbacks. They're capable, but they hurt our blitz, right? They hurt your numbers game in the box because whenever they release receivers, if you play, and we like to play. Here's the thing too, man. I don't understand the man coverage against mobile quarterbacks. I just don't get that. Somebody smarter than me will have to explain the man coverage on the back end against mobile quarterbacks. Because again, when you're in man coverage, your eyes are not on the quarterback. They're on your receiver. And if your receiver takes off downfield, your back is to the quarterback. So you're literally relying on defensive linemen and probably one. So let's say that the other team's offense swings out of back, right? Oklahoma State they're in a 4-2-5 look. So you have two linebackers. So let's say they swing out of back. And so now one linebacker's gone covering that back that swung out into the flats, right? Now you're in man coverage on the back end, and all the receivers just take off downfield. Now your entire secondary has your back to the line of scrimmage. Now you're relying on four linemen that are way, way, way less athletic than any of the quarterbacks we've faced, and Nick Martin. That's all you have left against a quarterback that is rushing. Now let me add an element to that. What if you blitz Nick Martin, of which we do a lot of, and then that blitz doesn't get home? Your secondary guys are ran off. Your linebacker is chasing a back that is swung in the flats. Nick Martin, the only spy left, the only guy left that can actually check, that's athletic enough to check the quarterback blitzes. Now what? I mean, that's kind of what we've seen. Now it's 65-yard runs from the quarterback. That's kind of what I'm talking about. That's why the 40 front, to me, why add a slower guy on the field that can't add layers to your defense like the three? That's why I understand that they probably thought, well, we're playing power rushing teams, so one more guy on the defensive line is what we have to have. But it actually has been the exact opposite from that perspective. So very frustrating. I'll say this one more time. The season is not over. I mean, the fat lady has not sung on this season. Oklahoma State, I would think, would rally to make a bowl. I always bet on Mike Gundy in these situations. I'll reiterate it one more time. I think he's very slow to make changes because he is very convicted in what he does. He believes in what he does, and yes, he's stubborn, and part of that is because he's very confident and cocky. But for those same factors that cause him to be very, maybe too slow in making changes, I also think that's what's made him so great as well. So I'm at the stage right now. Here's where I'm at with Oklahoma State. I've told you all the things that I think need to happen. I've given you all my frustrations. At this point, regardless of how long it has, regardless of how long it takes, I'm to the point to where the one thing that makes me feel the best about this is that Mike Gundy is our head coach. And at all cost, I bet on Mike Gundy because he's always come through in the past. Hey, I thank everybody for tuning in to our live show today. This has been absolutely wonderful. I'm going to do this whenever I'm home on Saturdays. I'm going to try to do a live show and talk to you every Saturday. We might also get a couple during the week. We are just getting this O State Daily site started. You can see all the interviews we've had. We just talked to Luke Phillips. Going to release my interview with Mike Curtis this next week. Talk to Wyatt Thompson, the Kansas State play-by-play announcer. I was going to talk to Bill Riley, the Utah play-by-play announcer. We actually had an interview set up, and he got busy, couldn't do it. Talk to Bruce Howard, the Tulsa play-by-play guy. Talk to Melvin Gilliam. Going to talk to Tatum Bell. I've got all sorts of different Oklahoma State Cowboys lined up to come on this show. It's going to be one after the other. Plus, you're going to have these live shows. You're going to have Chase joining us. You're going to have Scott McKinley joining us. We've got tons of content. We're just getting started here on O State Daily. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in to our live show today. It has been an absolutely awesome show. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you keep coming back to O State Daily. So thanks for tuning in, and go Pokes.